This conference will now be recorded.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Audible, sir.
Till how much I had covered in last class, can you tell me? Okay, we had covered this. All this I think I have covered. Um Primary acquired, secondary acquired. So, in primary acquired cholesteatoma, there will be no history of previous year discharge. But secondary acquired, there will be some history of year discharge before the patient develops a cholesteatoma. So, others are this post-traumatic and post-tympanoplasty where inadvertently the squamous epithelium is driven into the middle ear, and then when the graft is kept, then it is totally trapped in the middle ear now, then it slowly develops. So coming to the congenital type, the congenital arises from the trapped epithelial cell rest, and most commonly it is seen in the middle ear, and also sometimes you will find it in the petrous apex and also in the cerebello-pontine angle. So middle ear, petrous apex, cerebello-pontine angle. So there is no previous history of ear discharge, and there is a criteria which goes by the name of Levinson criteria, and this defines the congenital cholesteatoma should fulfill all the following criteria. One is see a white medial to normal tympanic membrane, and pars placida, pars tensa should be absolutely normal, and there should be no prior history of otorrhea or perforation, no prior otologic procedures. So all these are characteristic. If all the following four characteristics are present, and then you see a white mass, then only you say it to be a congenital cholesteatoma. And usually this white mass is seen in the antero-superior quadrant of the pars tensa. Okay. Now, uh, these I think we have covered. Uh, Another thing classification you can say is a pars placida cholesteatoma and a pars tensa cholesteatoma. Now, pars placida cholesteatoma is very common, and it is based on the retraction pocket by Widmer, uh, basal cell hyperplasia by Rudy. Okay, whereas this epithelial migration and squamous metaplasia are all seen in, these two particularly are seen in pars tensa cholesteatoma. The pars placida cholesteatoma, in the pars placida cholesteatoma, the involvement of ossicles occur little late in the disease, whereas in pars tensa cholesteatoma, the involvement of ossicle occurs pretty early. So once the ossicle is involved, so definitely the hearing loss will be more in pars tensa cholesteatoma, and the hearing loss or the hearing will be preserved for a longer duration of time in pars placida cholesteatoma. And in case of and sometimes what happens ki, even though the ossicles are eroded, some patients hear very well also. This is what happens in this condition is the cholesteatoma mass itself bridges the gap, it bridges the gap caused by ossicular erosion. So these patients are known as cholesteatoma hearers. So if you see the picture of malleus, incus and stapes, if the cholesteatoma has eroded the incus long process and settled down between touching the handle of malleus and the stapes head, then obviously this patient will have a very good hearing. But once you do the surgery, no, there will be a reduction in hearing rather than improvement. Okay, because now that cholesteatoma which was bridging the gap has been removed, so definitely the hearing will come down. So these are all we have seen. The basal cell hyperplasia, here like a cone from the prickle cell layer due to inflammation, this goes, and ultimately what happens, this epithelium breaks after a certain period of time, and then it leads to formation of cholesteatoma. In squamous metaplasia theory, the cuboidal epithelium undergoes metaplasia to squamous epithelium. So metaplasia, you know, by definition is conversion of one adult type of epithelium into another. So metaplasia can occur due to lot of causes. So here the most likely cause may be inflammation. Inflammation in the middle ear for a long duration of time can lead to squamous metaplasia. So migration theory, squamous epithelium from tympanic membrane migrates to middle ear via tympanic membrane perforation. This migration theory is very commonly seen in marginal perforation. Now, if you remember, the marginal perforation occurs in the posterior superior quadrant of the pars tensor, and from the marginal perforation, there occurs the epithelial migration. Now, if you go back to the etiology, the most common cause of retraction pocket formation is prolonged or continuous eustachian tube malfunction, so or dysfunction. So this eustachian tube dysfunction leads to a negative buildup of negative middle ear pressure, and then patient develops otitis media with effusion and then becomes adhesive otitis media. So if a patient develops adhesive otitis media, the obvious question will be, sir, why only retraction occurs in the posterior superior quadrant first, not in the antero superior or antero inferior or posterior inferior quadrant? The explanation to this is the posterior superior quadrant is more vascular compared to the other quadrants. The posterior superior quadrant is more vascular compared to the other quadrants, and therefore they are exposed to the ill effects of the cytokines and the leukotrienes, the interleukins. They all have a more deleterious effect on the posterior superior quadrant, leading to thinning of the posterior superior quadrant. That is what happens, the fibrous layer which is arranged so beautifully in three different layers, that is radial layer, then circular fibers and parabolic layers. Three layers are there. These are destroyed, and thereby and the collagen and elastin fibers are also destroyed. So what happens, the membrane becomes weak at that part and becomes more prone to be drawn inside or into the middle ear when the negative pressure develops. Am I clear? Hello?
Yes, sir.
So good. So what happens if The retraction goes on, and as the negative pressure is not relieved with time, then what happens? At some point of time, the membrane breaks, gives away, and then breaks, and then that leads to a perforation. So that leads to the development of a marginal perforation, and then this can, through this marginal perforation, epithelial debris, this squamous epithelium can migrate. Another condition is called as a necrotizing otitis media, in which there occurs total perforation. So necrotizing otitis media is caused by beta hemolytic streptococci in the setting of exanthematous fever like measles, particularly measles. So post exanthematous fever, when there occurs a superadded infection of beta hemolytic streptococci, that leads to complete loss of the tympanic membrane, including the fibrous annulus. So there is the definition of total perforation. So in total perforation, the fibrous annulus is also lost, and then the epithelial migration can very easily occur. And then post-traumatic, that is, this all I have taught last class to you, and you can see this is the Prusak space which we have discussed last time, and this Prusak space here is the most common site of retraction pocket, particularly in the pars flaccida. The Prusak space is the place where, when going by the Wittmark theory of attic retraction, the cholesteatoma starts here. And you can see this ledge of bone here. This is the outer attic wall or sputum. And this erosion of outer attic wall or sputum in a CT scan is a telltale sign of attic cholesteatoma. So when the attic cholesteatoma is present now, if then this outer attic wall or sputum will be eroded. It won't be that pointed. Like here it is it's a normal way. There is no, because you can see the black coloration where this indicates presence of air in the epitympana. Okay, you can see this is the malleus head. Malleus head is there, means this is the epitympana. Okay. Now, these are the pathology: cholesteatoma, osteitis and granulation tissue, ossicular necrosis, and cholesterol granule. So, clinical feature: ear discharge is scanty, purulent, continuous, foul smelling, and blood tinged. Hearing loss is conductive or sensorineural type. Tympanic membrane perforation may be a marginal perforation, or attic, or a total perforation. In case of a retraction pocket, it might be attic or in the posterior superior quadrant. And sometimes when when there is an active infection, you can see a cholesteatoma plaques also. So the discharge, some patients may not complain also of discharge. But when they say ki when there is itching in the ear, whenever I put my bud and meddle with it and bring it out, there is little bit of pus which is foul smell. So they are not aware because it is so scanty. Okay, and another thing you remember, and then sometimes it may also present to you as an oral polyp. So the oral polyp in the attic area should arise the suspicion of a cholesteatoma. So the polyp, you just don't try to pull it off the polyp, because it might be attached to the facial nerve or might be attached to the foot plate or any ossicle also. So if it is attached to facial nerve and the facial nerve is dehiscent, and then you might damage the nerve also. So immediately patient may develop facial palsy. So don't never pull out an oral polyp, and sometimes you may find granulation tissue. So in this condition, these patients will frequently come to you with episodes of blood tinged discharge. So whenever they put the bud into the ear and bring it out, there is red color blood. So then that scares the patient, and then they come to the OPD. So here you can see there is a deep retraction pocket over here, and then this is the neck of the malleus. You can see very clearly this is the lateral. This is the lateral process of malleus. This is the handle of the malleus. See the incus, long process of incus. You can see, and this is the stapes head. Also, you can see clearly. This is the stapedius tendon over here. Okay, and this is the round window niche. Okay, the oval window niche is over here, where the here you will get the oval. And some this, can you see here a small faint line? This is the chorda tympani nerve. So the chorda tympani nerve. Okay, and this is the posterior malleolar fold, and here very small one, anterior malleolar fold. You can see here a clear cut, a big polyp or granulation tissue is there in the attic region, and you can see a yellowish white mass. This definitely is a cholesteatoma. So sometimes what happens is the progression of cholesteatoma is not fixed actually. Now I told you there are two entities, either a pars tensa or a pars flaccida cholesteatoma. But here if you say, if you can ask me, sir, here it is diseases here also as well as here also. So here you can find both a pars tensa as well as a cholesteatoma mass in the in the pars tensa as well as in the pars flaccida. So it is not a fixed rule. So once the disease starts in the Prusak space, now I just go back. Let us say this here is the Prusak space. So Prusak space is a space bounded laterally by the outer retic wall, medially by the head of the malleus, and inferiorly by the what you say, this is the folds. Okay, and so here the cholesteatoma which goes into the Prusak space and cholesteatoma starts here in the Prusak space, then goes into the superior infudal space, and then goes into the adductus ad antrum, and then goes into the mastoid antrum. Or sometimes cholesteatoma which starts here in the Prusak space may go into the anterior epitympanum. So this, the common route is from here to the posterior epitympanum to the mastoid antrum. But sometimes you may get a cholesteatoma which may be extending posteriorly as well as going anteriorly into the anterior epitympanum. In some cases, this cholesteatoma which is like here over here, like over here, the cholesteatoma might have started here, but what happened if you go back and remember what was taught to you, the epitympanum is a very secluded place. So the middle ear is divided into three tier. The upper berth is the epitympanum, middle is mesotympanum, and the lower one is the hypotympanum. So the mesotympanum and hypotympanum are in continuity with one another. But the epitympanum is not that much in continuity. So the question you may ask, then how is the epitympanum ventilated? The epitympanum is ventilated through two openings. One is an anterior isthmus and a posterior isthmus. So what happens? These isthmus are just like two openings through which the air enters from the here. This is the eustachian orifice here. Air comes into the mesotympanum and diffuses to the posterior isthmus and the anterior isthmus into the attic area, and then through the adductus into the mastoid. So sometimes what happens when a cholesteatoma grows, it comes down also through the isthmus posticus, and then grows into the mesotympanum, because there is already a potential opening. So it just comes through the opening into the mesotympanum. So here if you see this patient, such a big cholesteatoma mass must be definitely involving the ossicular chain. So cholesteatoma is foul smelling because of bony necrosis, gram-negative infection of keratin debris, and cholesteatoma itself is foul smelling. So the typical foul smelling order is a rotten fish order, and mostly by osteitis and granulation tissue and gram-negative infection. So complications. So you see, remember that a severe otalgia, painful swelling around the ear, vertigo, nausea, vomiting. So as you know, because cholesteatoma has the property of bone erosion, no, so always you should anticipate, or you should keep an open mind that this patient might be having some complications. So always it is pertinent on your part to ask them the leading questions like, are you getting vertigo, are you getting nausea, are you getting vomiting? So vertigo usually indicates a fistula into the bony labyrinth, so which is most commonly is seen in the lateral semicircular canal. Then headache, blurred vision, projectile vomiting are all features of papilledema and can be seen in lateral sinus thrombophlebitis and even in case of a brain abscess. And then fever, neck rigidity, irritability, drowsiness are all features of lateral sinus thrombophlebitis as well as meningitis. Facial asymmetry, obviously, facial paralysis, headache, retroorbital pain signifies petrositis, and ataxia indicates cerebellar pathology, either a cerebellar abscess. So very important when a patient comes to you with a cholesteatoma, you should ask all these leading questions and also try to clinically elicit. Like say for vertigo, you can do a fistula test by simply pressing the tragus and releasing it. If there is a fistula, then definitely the patient will have a severe vertigo and nystagmus. So neck rigidity, you can ask the patient to flex the neck and touch the chest. If there is neck rigidity, patient can never do it. So headache, blurred vision, vomitings, obviously patient will tell to you. So investigation, most important here as in case of a acticoenteral disease is examination under operating microscope. Very important, and because why? Because when to operate a person. Now I told you there are two entities. One is inactive squamosal and active squamosal. If a patient is having an inactive squamosal disease, then it is not an indication for surgery. Rather, a patient having an active squamosal disease is a indication for surgery. Now, some patients are reluctant to get operated, or sometimes the opposite ear is a dead ear, and this is the only ear through which the patient can hear. So, in this situation, you cannot just go barge in and say, no, we'll operate it. Then what happens is the patient might develop a total hearing loss on the operated side also. So in those cases, if if you find that the sac, you can see the fundus of the sac, and you can under the microscope, and you can do a suction cleaning and make sure the retraction pocket is clean and healthy, then that is a better option to take rather than going for surgery. So examination under microscope, and also it will also tell you the ossicular status regarding the particularly the long process of incus. But as I told you, the two difference, the pars tensa cholesteatoma tends to be more aggressive and causes erosion of the ossicular chain, whereas the pars tensa you can find a very large cholesteatoma, but the ossicles will be intact. In a attic cholesteatoma, the cholesteatoma will be big one, but it will not involve the ossicle. We have seen in so many conditions, so many patients, that even though the cholesteatoma is large, but the ossicles are intact. So the ossicular erosion is much more common and occurs early in a pars tensa cholesteatoma. Then examination, first for culture and sensitivity, obviously you have to do, particularly if the patient is having recurrent episodes of ear discharge. Usually the culprit will be a gram-negative organism, mostly Pseudomonas, Proteus, Klebsiella, and in some cases Staph aureus also. Then another thing I want to add here is endoscopy examination, not nasal endoscopy, but a auto endoscopy. So nowadays, the auto endoscopy is taking precedence over examination under microscope, particularly to see one or two areas which are not easily accessible using a microscope. That is the sinus tympani and the facial recess. These are the two areas which are little secluded, the sinus tympani more secluded than the facial recess. So in this condition, a auto endoscopy examination is of great help in finding out whether the cholesteatoma, particularly in case of pars tensa cholesteatoma, has involved the sinus tympani and facial recess. So it is very important. You have to rule out any remnant cholesteatoma in the sinus tympani. So it has been seen that one of the major cause of recurrence of cholesteatoma is some residual disease in the sinus tympani. Audiological assessment, obviously you have to do. Again, it is not always mandatory that a attic cholesteatoma will have hearing loss. So, but if the plan is to go for a modified radical mastoidectomy, then you have to tell to the patient that the hearing benefit will not be as good as they expect. And if in spite of a large cholesteatoma which you have seen under the microscope or with the help of a auto endoscope, patient has a good hearing, then it indicates that he or she is a cholesteatoma hearer. And in those conditions, you have to inform them that the hearing might come down a little bit. X-ray of both mastoids. Now the CT of the temporal bone is far superior. Rather, it is a HRCT, a high resolution CT scan of temporal bone is very important and is almost a gold standard investigation for any visualization of the middle ear, visualization of the labyrinth, visualization of the mastoid. So what information you get? The most important information you get is the degree of pneumatization. Now, then what is the relation of pneumatization with cholesteatoma? Now, in children, no, it has been seen that the cholesteatoma is very extensive because in a pneumatic, well pneumatized bone, because the cholesteatoma goes and involves all the possible air cells. So, in case of a children with a pneumatic mastoid, you expect a large cholesteatoma. But the cholesteatoma occurs more commonly in a sclerotic bone. Cholesteatoma occurs more commonly in a sclerotic bone. But if it occurs in a pneumatic bone, it becomes very extensive. Now, when you do a X-ray of both the mastoid, the normal finding we see is there is sclerosis of the mastoid. Now, how their sclerosis develops? Now, if you see, if you compare a child having or a person having one ear disease and other ear is absolutely normal, if you take the X-ray, you find that the normal ear has a very good nematization, whereas the opposite ear, the pathology ear, is sclerotic. Now, how the sclerosis develops? This sclerosis occurs due to bone remodeling because of continuous osteoclastic and osteoblastic activity. Now, it has been seen that the osteoclastic activity is more common around the ossicle area, whereas the osteoblastic activity is more common or takes precedence in the mastoid area. So, the mastoid area usually becomes sclerosed because of more bone remodeling by osteoblastic activity. At simultaneously, both the things will be going on, the osteoclastic and osteoblastic. So as you might be knowing by this time, I would have told you the bone resorption osteoclastic activity is all triggered by the interleukins, mainly 1, 6, 8, and then parathyroid like hormone and leukotrienes, cathepsin D. They are all enzymatic and mediated by cytokines. Previously, it was thought that there was pressure of cholesteatoma causes bone erosion, but those are now gone into the dustbin. So it is definitely the chemical mediated or inflammatory mediated, uh, what you say, the bone resorption. So once these interleukin 1, 6, 8, they come, and the tumor necrosis factor alpha, beta, what they do, they in, and then there occurs also neovascularization due to increased expression of vascular epithelial growth factor. And then this neovascularization causes more recruitment of inflammatory mediators, and along with it, the osteoclasts also come, and that leads to bone resorption. So you might have heard of hyperemic decalcification. This hyperemic decalcification is there is increased vascularity, and through that blood vessels osteoclasts come and they cause bone resorption. Basic investigation like blood investigation, X-ray of paranasal sinuses, and diagnostic nasal endoscopy and eustachian tube function test also should be done. But this eustachian tube function has a more relevance when you are doing a safe type of CSM, like you are planning for a myringoplasty. So one of the prerequisites for myringoplasty is a patient should have a adequate or a normal functioning eustachian tube. Examination under microscope already we have discussed. Audiogram we have discussed, and you can see this is the X-ray. Also, you can comment on the tegmen and anteriorly lying sinus plate. Also, you can see cellular, and this is a sclerotic mastoid. You can see compared to here, you can see the sigmoid sinus is little anteriorly placed, and the dura is little low lying. This you can say is a contracted mastoid, and this sclerosis is occurs due to a osteoblastic activity. Now here you can see a CT scan. This is the axial cut, and you can see there is erosion of the posterior metal wall here. Big erosion is there, and this is the mass over here, and this is the basal turn of the cochlea you are seeing, and this is the eustachian tube orifice over here. Okay. So treatment mostly short term is elimination of infection, control of otorrhea, which is very difficult unless and because the source is the infected keratin debris. So till the keratin debris goes on accumulating, then the chance of controlling the infection is very less. And long-term goal definitely is surgical, and there are two things actually what we plan here is one is to goal at eradicating the disease, and second is for creating a hearing to try to improve the hearing. Now, because we are taking the treatment of both the topics simultaneously, that is CSM with safe type and unsafe type. In case of safe type, you can advise a dry mopping or wet mopping and suction irrigation under microscope. Topical antibiotics and systemic antibiotics. Topical antibiotics now mostly preferred is ciprofloxacin or gentamicin. These two antibiotics are very rampantly used. Now, where you can use the antibiotic and this is early disease with shallow retraction pocket. So, if there is a shallow retraction pocket, no, definitely, and you can see the fundus. The most important thing is after cleaning the debris, you should see the fundus. If you are seeing the fundus, then you are safe. That nothing is there in the fundus. Fundus means the most medial part of the pocket. And then only hearing ear with cholesteatoma. So in these conditions, it is better to do regular suction cleaning. And another thing you remember, key in cholesteatoma, now what happens, key, the turnover of the cell increases because of three things. One is, P53, proto-oncogene, c-MYC, and c-RAS. These three, what they do, they increase the apoptosis. That is a programmed cell death. Apoptosis is programmed cell death. So they hasten the process of apoptosis. P53, c-MYC, and c-RAS. So what happens is the turnover is very fast in case of the cholesteatoma. Now it has been seen that the turnover is almost 2 to 2.3 times faster than that of the turnover of external auditory canal. So what happens? That is why the accumulation occurs much faster than you anticipate. Okay, so these keratin debris, if they are not infected, then there is no discharge. But once they are infected by, suppose, the entry of water or by gram-negative organism, then definitely this patient will present to you with ear discharge. Elderly patient who is not fit for surgery, in all these conditions, you can go for a conservative manner. So the conservative management in case of cholesteatoma is a regular follow-up and suction and cleaning under a operating microscope. That is very important, and also a regular follow-up. So you should see the patient at least every 2 to 3 monthly once. And some books write that application of mitomycin C reduces the keratin debris turnover. But that is, I don't know, our any PG students are there? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
This application of mitomycin C.
It prevents
Nandini is there?
sclerosis.
Prevents sclerosis.
I mean,
In case of
addition, sir. Addition, sir.
No, with respect to cholesteatoma. Nandini is there? Hello? I think she is not there. Okay. Now this mitomycin C, Anwar?
Sir, it prevents bone more destruction, sir. Mitomycin C prevents more destruction, sir.
it prevents desiccation, no, and thereby, in particularly in case of elderly patients and those who are not fit for surgery, no, it delays the process. It doesn't arrest it, but it delays the process. So surgical procedure boils down into two things: canal wall down, canal wall up. So canal wall means what? The only thing is the posterior bony meatal wall. So that means that is the canal wall. So where the posterior bony meatal wall is not touched upon, it is known as a canal wall up procedure. And where it is you bring it down or drill it out, it is known as a canal wall down procedure. And next is reconstructive surgery. Hearing can be restored by myringoplasty or tympanoplasty, or I will add even ossiculoplasty. And third is conservative treatment. Now, and the canal wall down procedure classically is known as a modified radical mastoidectomy, a radical mastoidectomy, and a Bondi's operation. So these three comes in canal wall down surgery, that is a modified radical, a radical mastoidectomy, and a Bondi's operation. Now, the canal wall down procedure, there are two approaches. One is the posterior to anterior approach and the anterior to posterior approach. So what we do here routinely is a posterior to anterior approach. Like what we do, we open the mastoid first and then go to the adductus and follow the cholesteatoma. But now surgeons are giving saying that it is better to go for a anterior to posterior approach if you are thinking it to be a small cholesteatoma, not for a large cholesteatoma, but for a small cholesteatoma. So this is known as the anterior to posterior approach is also known as a inside out technique. Inside out technique. So here what happens in this anterior to posterior approach, you start drilling from the epitympanum, that is from where you see the cholesteatoma, and go on drilling till the fundus of the sac. So where the fundus of the sac, once you see the fundus of the sac, you stop your drilling there. So the advantage is you create a very small cavity in case of a anterior to posterior approach, and unnecessary you do not open the mastoid antrum. So thereby what happens, it consumes time, that is one. Number two, the cavity is small, and number three, unnecessary operation is not done over the mastoid area. But the posterior to anterior approach is the gold standard approach for a large cholesteatoma, which has gone from the epitympanum to the adductus ad antrum and also involving the mastoid antrum. In all these conditions, you have to go for a posterior to anterior. Now, this canal wall down procedure, we do it routinely here. Our protocol is, in case of a cholesteatoma, you go for a canal wall down procedure, try to remove the disease very nicely and thoroughly, and then you think of reconstructing the hearing. But once you make a canal wall down procedure, now what happens key? In some condition, you keep a very big cavity. You make a very big cavity. So once the cavity is very big, no, you have to, what you say, you have to, it will take time for complete epithelialization. So then what happens is the patient presents to you with a discharging ear post-operatively for a long duration of time. So this is called as post-mastoidectomy cavity problem. So post-mastoidectomy cavity problem can be an issue with a posterior to anterior approach. But nowadays, even certain techniques are available to obliterate the mastoid. to obliterate the mastoid after the surgery. We are using lot of technique. We are using even the temporalis muscle is cut and put into the cavity, and then you can also use bone dust. You can use bone pate, or you can even use hydroxyapatite crystals. So the hydroxyapatite and bone pate are alloplastic material, whereas uh, the bone dust of the patient can be collected during the surgery, and that can be again kept into the mastoid cavity once you remove the disease and smoothen the cavity. So this is called as ultimately what happens, you reduce the size of the cavity with the main sole purpose that it will heal faster and the cavity will be small, and then it will be easy to access and clean the cavity. So this is the thing about the canal wall down procedure. So the post mastoidectomy cavity issue mostly is seen in those who do the MRM, or those who are doing MRM in particularly in the early half of their career of ENT surgeon. This post mastoidectomy cavity problem it can be quite troublesome. Why? Because of two things. One is you fear of the facial nerve, that you might injure the facial nerve, because the facial nerve traverses in close relation with the posterior bony meatal wall. So when you are not very much sure about the position of facial nerve, and you want to be more cautious that at least let me not give him a facial nerve paralysis, so they leave a high facial ridge. So this high facial ridge will cause the secretion to accumulate in the mastoid tip area and leading to a sump effect. So then what happens is this sump effect, and that area will remain moist, and then that will delay the epithelialization. And once the secretions are retained, they get infected. And every now and then the patient comes to you with a mastoid cavity problem. Then another is doing a very reluctantly or doing a very small neatoplasty. So when you are making a large cavity, the normal contour of the external auditory canal or opening of the external auditory meatus is not adequate enough to ventilate the cavity now. So you have to remove a piece of conchal cartilage over here and then make it a large one. So when you remove the conchal cartilage, now this conchal cartilage also you can use it for obliteration of the mastoid. So this is the two big procedure. One is a anterior to posterior approach, a posterior to anterior approach. There are also very small procedures like doing a aticotomy only. Now, if you see a very small cholesteatoma limited only to the attic, so you do a aticotomy and then you remove the sac and then you reconstruct the attic. So the attic reconstruction, you can bring a cartilage and cover and keep the cartilage in such a way that the attic is reconstructed. Now, why it is necessary to reconstruct? Because that will prevent development of retraction in future if the negative pressure develops. Canal wall up procedure we will take up in the next class. Acha, regarding the exam, let me inform you 2 to 3 things. The exam will be a theory paper of 40 mark, having 11 questions. One question, long question, is of 10 mark, and then you have 5 questions each carrying 4 mark, and another 5 questions carrying 2 marks. So total 11 questions. So you are allotted time period of 2 hours. Now here what you have to do is all of you should download a PDF converter in your mobile phone, and then and the principals are told key by 12:05 you have to upload your answer sheet in the official website of our ENT department, which will be given to you. So my sincere request is you try to finish off your answering the questions by 11:45 and you upload your answer. So if you go beyond 12:05, that site will be closed and you will not be able to upload your answer and you will be taken as absent. So my request is all of you download the PDF converter, and before you test once or twice how it is working out for you and what are the settings and how to you do a small practice, and so that by 10th you are well trained enough to do it fast. Any doubt? Any doubt? Hello?
No, sir.
Regarding the exam, are you clear now?
Yes, sir.
Huh? Any doubt regarding the exam?
Yes,
Please tell
sir.
me.
Yes.
What? Yes. Everything is clear for you? So I think I'll all the best to all of you. Write your exam well and try to finish it off by 11:45 so that you have time in your hand to upload the answers. Okay.